The click of the post button was the loudest sound in the quiet dorm room. For Genevieve, a journalism student, the shaky footage on her phone was more than just a viral clip. It was a moral crossroad. The video showed a burly construction worker lashing out at a helpless dog, an act of casual cruelty that the internet would surely condemn. But as the view count exploded, a wave of guilt, not triumph, washed over her, making her question if she had just destroyed a man's life or delivered a just punishment. What do you think is the line between citizen journalism and mob justice? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story as it unfolds. The day had started badly for Brody. It began with the groan of his old pickup truck's engine refusing to turn over, a metallic cough that sounded expensive. That was the first crack in his patience. The second was the argument with his landlord, a terse phone call about rent being 3 days late, a call that left Brody feeling small and cornered. By the time he got to the construction site, after a costly rideshare, he was already an hour behind, earning him a sharp reprimand from his foreman in front of the entire crew. The shame burned hotter than the midday sun. All day, every swing of his hammer, every lift of a heavy beam, felt like a fight against a world that was pushing him down from all sides. The only thing he looked forward to was his 30-minute lunch break, a small island of peace where he could sit, eat his sandwich, and not think about the mountain of bills or the increasingly desperate texts from his mother's nursing home back in Ohio. He found a spot on a low brick wall outside a small cafe, the least crowded place he could find. He unwrapped his sandwich, the smell of roast beef, a minor comfort. That's when he saw it. A small, scruffy dog, a mix of browns and tans with ribs showing through its matted fur, was sitting a few feet away, its eyes fixed on his sandwich. It let out a soft whine. In that moment, the dog wasn't just a dog. It was another problem, another hungry mouth, another symbol of his own failure to provide, to keep up, to just be okay. It was the final crack. "Get out of here," Brody grumbled, waving a hand at it. The dog just took a hopeful step closer, its tail giving a tentative wag. The pressure in Brody's chest tightened. All the frustration from the truck, the landlord, the foreman, the bills, it all coalesced into a single ugly point of rage. He stood up, intending only to shoo it away more forcefully. He swung his leg, his heavy steel-toed work boot leading the way. He didn't mean to make contact, not really, but his anger made the movement clumsy and too fast. The dog yelped, a sharp, piercing sound of pain and surprise as it scrambled away, disappearing down an alley. Brody stood there, his heart pounding, the rage instantly replaced by a hollow feeling of shame. Before he could even process what he'd done, a woman's voice cut through the air. "What is wrong with you? It's just a little dog." Another man shouted, "Hey, I saw that! You kicked that dog!" Within seconds, a small crowd had formed. Faces stared at him, a mixture of shock and disgust. From across the street, Genevieve lowered her phone, her hands trembling slightly. She had been walking back from a political science lecture, her mind on an upcoming paper, when the man's sudden, violent movement caught her eye. Her instincts, honed by 3 years of journalism school, took over. She had hit record without even thinking, capturing the entire brutal, inexcusable act. Now, as she watched the public confrontation unfold, she felt a surge of righteous purpose. This was what journalists did. They held people accountable. They gave a voice to the voiceless, even if that voice was a pained yelp. Someone in the crowd had called the authorities. Within 10 minutes, a white van with city animal care and control on the side pulled up. 2 uniformed officers, both women, stepped out. They were calm and professional as they took statements from the emotional bystanders. Brody just stood there, mute, his half-eaten sandwich still on the brick wall. One of the officers approached him while the other went to find the dog in the alley. "Sir, did you kick an animal?" the officer asked, her tone neutral but firm. Brody couldn't find the words to explain the storm inside him. He just nodded numbly. The other officer returned, gently carrying the small, trembling dog. It didn't appear to be seriously injured, but it was terrified. As they placed the dog carefully into a carrier in the back of the van, The image was seared into Brody's mind. His one moment of lost control had led to this. He was cited for animal cruelty, a pink slip of paper that felt as heavy as a gravestone. The next day, the foreman called him into his office. He didn't even ask for Brody's side of the story. "Saw the citation, Brody. We can't have that kind of liability on our crew. Pick up your final check on Friday." Just like that, his job was gone. Meanwhile, Genevieve's video, which she had uploaded with the caption, "Heartless construction worker attacks starving stray dog in broad daylight," was exploding. By the time Brody lost his job, it had 1 million views. By the end of the week, it was on the national news. Brody's face was everywhere. He was no longer a man. He was a monster, a meme, a villain in a 30-second clip. His phone buzzed endlessly with hateful messages and threats. His landlord served him an eviction notice, citing a clause in his lease about illegal activities. Holed up in his now darkened apartment, surrounded by packing boxes he had no energy to fill, Brody fell apart. The shame was a physical weight, pressing him into the stained fabric of his armchair. He was everything they said he was, a monster, a failure. The world he had been fighting so hard to hold together had not just collapsed, it had been publicly demolished. This was the man Genevieve found 2 weeks later. Consumed by a growing, sickening guilt, she had watched the consequences of her video spiral far beyond what she'd ever imagined. She hadn't wanted to ruin his life. She had wanted to call out a bad act. But the internet didn't do nuance. She used her research skills to find his address, feeling a desperate need to see the man behind the monster she had created. She didn't know what she would say. "Sorry, I hope you're okay." It all sounded pathetic. She stood outside his apartment door, the wood peeling, the air in the hallway smelling of stale cigarettes. She took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened a crack, and a bloodshot eye peered out. He looked thinner, his face gaunt, the powerful frame from the video now slumped and defeated. He recognized her instantly. The flicker of recognition in his eyes turned to a blaze of pure, undiluted hatred. "You," he rasped, his voice raw. He threw the door open. "Are you happy now? You and your damn phone. You wanted a story? Well, you got one. My life is over. I have nothing left. Is that what you wanted?" Genevieve flinched, taking a step back. I just wanted to—" "You wanted to what?" he spat, his voice cracking. "Get more followers? Feel like a hero? Get out of here. Get out and leave me alone." He slammed the door with a force that shook the frame, the sound echoing the finality of a gavel. Genevieve was left standing in the dim hallway, the rejection absolute. Her first attempt to fix the damage she had caused had only made the wound deeper. Genevieve walked away from Brody's apartment feeling worse than before. The anger in his eyes was visceral, and she knew she had earned it. But walking away for good didn't feel right either. The story was supposed to be over after she posted the video. The bad guy was exposed. The system was handling it. But the man who had slammed the door in her face wasn't just a one-dimensional villain. He was a broken person, and she held the hammer that had shattered him. She couldn't let it go. Her journalistic curiosity blended with her guilt, compelling her to dig deeper. She went back to the construction site, not as a student journalist, but just as a person asking questions. She found a few of the crew members at a nearby diner. Most of them clammed up when they heard Brody's name, not wanting to be associated with him. But one older man, a carpenter named Sal, gestured for her to sit down. "Brody's a good man," Sal said, stirring his coffee. "Quiet, kept to himself, but a hard worker, always the first to show up and the last to leave." He sighed, looking out the window. He was under a lot of pressure. His mom's got Alzheimer's back east. The care is expensive. He was sending every spare dollar he had to her. He was working overtime, picking up side jobs. The man was running on fumes. Sal shook his head. What he did was wrong, no doubt about it, but he ain't a monster. He's just a man who finally broke. The information changed everything for Genevieve. This wasn't a story about a cruel man. It was a story about a desperate man whose stress had found a terrible outlet. His anger wasn't random. It was the overflow of a reservoir of pain and powerlessness. Armed with this new perspective, she knew she had to try again, but differently. Knocking on his door had been a confrontation. He needed compassion. She went to the grocery store and bought a bag full of non-perishables: pasta, canned soup, bread, peanut butter. Then she went to an ATM and took out $200, a significant chunk of her student loan money. She wrote a short note, her handwriting careful. It read, "I spoke to Sal. I know about your mom. I'm so sorry for what my video did to you. This isn't about the internet anymore. Here's the number for a free legal aid clinic that helped a friend of mine. And this is for a counselor my uncle saw when he lost his job. Please, just use this to eat." She put the note, the numbers, and the cash into an envelope, drove to his apartment, and tucked it securely into the handle of his screen door. Then she left. She didn't expect to hear anything back. For 2 days, there was only silence. Then, late one evening, her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It contained only 2 words: "Thank you." It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was the first small win. Brody used the money for food and called the legal aid number. They assigned him a public defender who, while overworked, was sympathetic. He also kept the number for the counselor. He hadn't called it yet, but he hadn't thrown it away either. A week later, Genevieve texted him. "How are you doing?" He responded this time, "Still here." Their communication continued like that, in short, careful texts. He slowly began to open up about the pressure he was under, and she listened without judgment. She realized her role wasn't to be his savior, but maybe just his first point of human contact in a world that had written him off. The biggest obstacle, however, was the system. His court date was looming, and the city prosecutor, riding a wave of public outrage fueled by Genevieve's video, was determined to make an example of him. The external antagonist wasn't just a person. It was the unyielding force of public opinion and the legal machine it had set in motion. Adding to that pressure was Ms. Albright, the director of the city animal shelter. She was a formidable woman who had seen the worst of humanity's treatment of animals, and she had given a fiery interview to the local news, calling Brody's actions the work of a sociopath and demanding the maximum sentence. She was the face of the unforgiving public. Genevieve, trying to help Brody show remorse, suggested a difficult step. "Maybe you should go to the shelter," she texted. "Not to make a scene, just to see the dog. To make a donation with what little you have. It would show you're sorry." It took him a week to agree. He was terrified, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He walked into the shelter lobby, a crumpled $20 bill in his hand. But as he approached the front desk, a woman with a severe haircut and sharp eyes looked up from her computer. It was Ms. Albright. Recognition dawned on her face, and her expression hardened into pure steel. "I know who you are," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "You have some nerve showing your face here. We don't want your blood money." Brody froze, the faces of volunteers and potential adopters turning to stare at him. I just wanted to—" "You wanted to what?" She cut him off, standing up. "Take a victory lap? See the animal you traumatized? Get out. We have security cameras everywhere. Get out of this building right now, or I will call the police and have you charged with trespassing and harassment." The public humiliation was a lit match on his frayed nerves. The feeling of being cornered, of being unjustly condemned, roared back to life. "I was just trying to do the right thing," he yelled back, his voice echoing in the large room. "I made a mistake. Can't a man make a mistake?" The scene was ugly. A volunteer quickly led a family with a small child out of the room. Brody saw the fear in their eyes and realized what he was doing. He was proving them all right. He was the monster. Defeated, he turned and stormed out of the shelter, slamming the glass door behind him. He got into his truck, the engine of which he had finally managed to fix, and drove away, convinced now more than ever that redemption was a lie. The final court date was set for a rainy Tuesday in November. A powerful storm had been lashing the city for 2 days, and the streets were slick with water and fallen leaves. Brody was sitting in his sparse apartment, rehearsing the apology his public defender had told him to give, when his phone rang. It was Genevieve. Her voice was frantic. "Brody, are you watching the news?" she asked. "No, I'm trying to prepare for tomorrow," he said grimly. "Turn it on. The local station, the storm. It's causing flooding near the river. The city animal shelter is right in the middle of it. Brody flipped on his small TV. The screen showed footage of muddy water rising around the old, low-lying shelter building. A reporter was explaining that a drainage culvert had failed, and the water was rising fast. The shelter was being evacuated, but they were short on help. Then, a new piece of information came in. A structural engineer, on a pre-scheduled inspection, had just reported a major crack in one of the main support beams in the old kennel wing. The weight of the rain-soaked roof was threatening a collapse. Genevieve's voice came through the phone again. "Brody, they need help. People with your kind of skills." He hesitated. The last time he was at that shelter, he had been thrown out, humiliated. Why should he help the very people who saw him as a monster? He looked at the TV, at the images of terrified dogs barking in their cages as the water rose. He thought of the small, scruffy dog that had started it all. He was the reason that dog was in there in the first place. "I'm on my way," he said, and hung up. When Brody arrived, the scene was chaos. Volunteers were scrambling to move animals, and Ms. Albright was shouting orders, her face pale with stress. He pushed through the crowd, his work boots sloshing through the ankle-deep water. He found Ms. Albright near the entrance to the kennel wing. She looked at him, shock and disbelief on her face. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "I'm here to help," Brody said, his voice calm and firm. "I heard about the beam. I've been in commercial construction for 20 years. Let me see it." She was about to refuse, but a loud creak from inside the building made the decision for her. She nodded, and Brody ran inside. He found the beam immediately. It was worse than he thought. A long, jagged crack ran down its length. The roof was audibly groaning. He took charge instantly, his years of experience kicking in. He started calling out orders, directing volunteers to bring him scrap lumber, jacks from the maintenance shed, anything he could use. He worked with a speed and precision that left everyone, including Ms. Albright, in stunned silence. He built a series of temporary braces, shoring up the failing beam with a makeshift but solid structure. He knew it wouldn't hold forever, but it would hold through the night. It would save the roof. As he finished, exhausted and soaked to the bone, he helped move the last few animals. In a cage in the far corner, a small, scruffy dog was cowering, trembling with fear. It was the one. Brody knelt, speaking to it in a low, gentle voice. "Hey there, fella. It's okay. We're going to get you out of here." He opened the cage, and after a moment's hesitation, the dog crept forward and licked his hand. Brody carefully picked him up and carried him out to safety. The next day in court, Brody stood before the judge, ready to accept his punishment. But before the prosecutor could speak, a new voice called out. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" It was Ms. Albright. She walked to the front, her demeanor entirely changed. She told the judge everything that had happened the night before. She described how Brody had arrived without being asked, how he had single-handedly prevented a catastrophic collapse, saving the lives of dozens of animals. "I was wrong about this man," she said, looking directly at Brody. "I saw a monster from a video, but last night I saw a hero. He has shown more remorse and character through his actions than anyone could with words." The judge, looking over Brody's file and seeing his completed anger management course certificate, was visibly moved. He looked at Brody. "Your actions last night speak volumes. Sentences reduced to 100 hours of community service." He paused, then added, "to be served at the city animal shelter, assisting with the structural repairs they so clearly need." Months later, the shelter was repaired, stronger and safer than before, thanks largely to Brody's donated labor and expertise. He had become a fixture there, the quiet, reliable volunteer who was best with the most frightened dogs. On his last day of community service, Ms. Albright handed him a form. It was an adoption application. "He's been waiting for you," she said with a small smile. "We've been calling him Buster." Brody walked to the kennel that now housed his friend. He opened the door, and Buster ran out, jumping up on him, his tail a blur of happiness. Brody knelt and wrapped his arms around the little dog. He had lost almost everything, but in the end, through a single terrible mistake and a long, difficult path to fix it, he had found something better, a new beginning, a new purpose. and a friend who had forgiven him long before he had forgiven himself. Do you believe a person's entire character can be judged by their single worst action, especially when it's captured on video? If this story made you think, consider subscribing and joining our community where we explore the complicated truths behind the headlines. We look forward to sharing our next story with you.